Well, good morning, everybody. There may be some people who are joining us later. And I put this slide up because normally when we gather, everybody's very chatty. So I put this slide up just to invite you to get comfortable for this morning's session, to sit in quiet. And you may want to reflect on what that felt like, just to be quiet for a few minutes. So if you're not on mute, please put yourself on mute now. There will be an opportunity very soon for the mics to open up so we can talk about some things together as a group. So we'll be doing that at various times. So welcome to session 2 of Introduction to Meditation. I'm so glad that you're all here. Who knew when we met last Wednesday, everything that would transpire after we gathered. So hopefully you've had a chance to use what you're learning and what you're practicing during these sessions in your day-to-day life. So let's talk a little bit about what we're going to be focusing on today. First, we're going to review last week's practice, maybe do a little bit of troubleshooting, talk about the things you noticed. And I always want to remind you that this is not an opportunity for self-judgment, self-criticism. I keep stressing that meditation is a practice. It's not a perfect. Then we're going to talk a little bit more about the stress response, because a lot of you signed up for meditation, if you're not already meditators, because you see it as a valuable tool in managing day-to-day stress. So we're going to talk about how that works, the physiology behind that. We're going to identify some of the specific benefits of meditation. And we're going to engage in the practice of walking meditation. And I like to say that walking meditation, as I see it, is kind of a bridge between the practice of meditation, which is a more formal practice, to the practice of mindfulness, which is applying those principles of awareness and present moment awareness to everything we do in our daily life. So let's talk a little bit about your practice. I'd like to hear from you. You can unmute yourselves at this point to talk a little about those 5 minutes that you set aside each day to practice. How did it go? What did you notice? So the floor is open. Feel free to speak. Unmute yourself.
I actually did it, and I will continue.
So what did you notice from those? Did you use 5 minutes as your guide for that?
5 minutes and a stopwatch. Yes.
So you weren't checking your watch. Great.
So no, I closed my eyes. I hadn't raised the shades in the room. It was at 9 o'clock. So
you went to the same place at the same time each day. I lost you. I can't hear you.
Same day, the same place, the same time with the stopwatch.
Okay. And what did you notice? Anything you want to share about what that was like?
I noticed the quiet.
Okay. Good.
Judy, why is it so hard to meditate? I did it each day. I think I missed one, but it was such a struggle. And I got to thinking, why do we have so much trouble just sitting quietly for 5 minutes and not letting our minds race crazily about what we have to do and what we need to do and what we must do and all the rest of it. Is there any information on actually why it is so difficult to do this practice?
Is the way your mind works. The mind is always busy. And remember that meditation is not about creating a blank slate. The practice of meditation is noticing when the thought arises, you're noticing, and then you come back to your focus, which was the breath, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
So, full disclosure here, even people who have been meditating years and years and years will tell you that the periods of time during which they experience that complete stillness, very, very brief, very brief. So it's the coming back, it's the coming back. And what I'm hearing from you is a little bit of self-judgment. Like, what's wrong with me that I can't do this? You know,
More curiosity, really.
curiosity is a good place.
Yes.
Because you're going to be finding out more and more the more you practice about how your particular mind works.
Mm.
Just for example, I'm a planner. You know, I've got my to-do lists, I have all of those things. So my default setting when I'm encouraging myself to meditate, to be quiet, to be mindful, whatever, is my mind keeps jumping to the planning.
Mm-hmm.
As if by jumping to the planning, I'm going to somehow actually do those things. But planning is not the same thing as doing, is it?
No.
No. But I notice that that's a trait that I have. Other people may be worriers. So they're sitting there and they're worrying about something. So one of the techniques that was shared with me early on in meditation was to notice what the thought is and perhaps name it. So when I start going through the to-do list, I say to myself, planning, planning, planning. And it's sort of like turning down the volume in that behavior, in that process, and then coming back. So if you can name what it is that's going through your thoughts at that point, sometimes that's helpful, and you can try that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else want to weigh in on?
Sure, Judy,
Yeah.
it's Melanie.
Hi, Melanie.
How are you? I practiced every day as I was listening to what she was saying. Some of the things I also do is same place, same time. And actually in my case, I don't leave my bed until I've done my meditation. And in my case, what I found is helpful is to focus on my breathing. So I'm doing actually more of a controlled setting where I have a CD that I use that encourages me to use different breathing techniques while I'm doing it. And I find that helps me. That's a strategy I found. And the other thing is I thought about what you had said last week. And every time an idea pops up and I start thinking, I just say in my head, thought. So I'm not identifying what kind of thought it is. It's just thought. And then I go back and meditate. And those things have helped me.
Mhm.
I mean, boy, did I need it this last week or so.
Tell me about it, Melanie. That's why we're here, because this is a tool. This is not some abstract practice. This is called what we need to do to help ourselves stay sane and healthy.
Yeah.
So
Thank
yeah,
you.
I liked what you were saying. And just as a reminder to people, on the resource material that I sent out prior to the first session, there were some excellent resources there. There's a few apps for meditation. There's some CDs that are recommended for meditation. And I had another thought while you were speaking, Melanie, that another technique that some people find useful is counting breaths.
Mm.
So in other words, they'll breathe in, and
1,
count
2, 3,
one,
4.
but much
out.
slower, breathing in one, up to 10, and then go back to 1, and then go back up
I
to
think
10.
there's one a process that's sort of like a box where you're doing
The
up,
box breathing.
4, across. In my head,
Yes.
I visualize. So
Yes.
you're
Yeah.
breathing a certain amount of numbers up, a certain amount of numbers across, certain amount of numbers down, and then certain amount of numbers across again going back. So that's one of the things I've done, box breathing.
So why that is useful, because the mind is going to continue to generate thoughts. That's what the mind does. So I used the analogy last week of training the puppy to sit, right? So the puppy runs away, you bring the puppy back, puppy sits, puppy runs away, you bring it back. That's what we do in meditation. We keep coming back. The more we can redirect, the mind is going to generate activity. So what I'm suggesting to you is to, when you focus on the breath, you're focusing on something. You're giving that puppy mind something to chew on, focusing on the breath, focusing on the breath, focusing on the breath. So there's really not a whole lot of room for other thoughts to even begin to arise. They will. They absolutely will. I mean, I can guarantee you that. But you have that focus, because the mind, as we know, can only effectively do one thing at a time. And I'm going to say that again, because I've got a lot of multitaskers out there, including me. The mind can only fully do one thing at a time. So if we're allowing it to focus on the breath, that's what it's going to do. And permit those other thoughts, feelings, whatever, to go into the background. They're not going to disappear completely, but they will go into the background. Okay, some days it'll be very easy. Some days it'll be very challenging. And I don't know about you, but I've had a pretty challenging week so far since last Wednesday. I imagine a lot of you have. Thanks, Melanie. Anybody else want to weigh in on their practice or ask any questions?
Hi, Judy. Question, Joe here.
Hi, Joe.
Good morning. If mind can only do one thing at a time, we have all these other things coming into our mind, of course, to distract us, I guess. But how is it, I'm a musician, and how is it sometimes you can do, I'm sure it applies to other things, you can go on what I call autopilot. I'm supposed to be focusing on this music right now. And now all of a sudden I'm thinking about, I got to cut my lawn or something. That's just a bad example, but you know what I mean? How does that happen? And, how can we be more, this is what I'm hoping this will help me with, be more mindful to stay in that one place.
Yeah, and I'm kind of laughing to myself, because if you speak to a woman who has young children, she will tell you, and I will tell you from my experience of raising 2 kids, you have to be able to multitask a little bit so that your kids survive, because you have to be watching 12 different things at once and doing other things. But the key word is the mind can only fully focus on one thing at a time. Fully focus. So you said a couple of really interesting things, and we're going to get to that when we get to the walking meditation today and the whole idea of mindfulness. You are so trained and skilled as a musician that there's parts of it, your fingers are just doing what they do. I can't even remember what instrument you play, but your body has been so trained to do music that you really don't have to spend as much energy. Like if you were a novice musician, you have to focus on everything. If you're learning to play the piano, where are your fingers? Where are your feet? Where are you on the pedals? But you're past that. So you're fully engaged, but your body is doing the work for you. You're in a default mode setting. That makes sense, Joe?
Yes, it does. Thank you for answering that.
Yeah, okay. I also wanted to touch on something that Patty, I don't know if you're here on the call this morning. I didn't see the list. But you had talked about a friend of yours who works out at the gym, and she says she doesn't meditate because she gets on the treadmill and she gets very quiet, and she finds it very relaxing and stress relieving. Well, as I thought about my response to your question, I didn't really do it justice. And I want to introduce the idea. I know some of you are runners out there, some of you are musicians. This applies to you as well, too, Joe, with your music. There is a state that they coined it with running, and they called it runner's high. But it's really a flow state when your body gets in this rhythm and whatever. It is not exactly the same thing as meditation, because in meditation, we are intentionally sitting and becoming quiet. Okay. So the flow state arises because of chemicals that are being released in your body related to certain activities. Is that a little clearer?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a helpful comparison. Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah, so flow state, runner's high, makes you feel really good. It's not exactly the same thing as meditation.
Yeah,
It's a useful tool.
Wow.
Right.
Mhm.
Anybody else want to weigh in on what their practice was like? Any challenges you faced? Okay. So if you'd mute yourselves now, we're going to move along. And I want to remind you that I'm always available by phone, by email. Should something come up in your practice that you really would like to talk about right away, please reach out to me. So let's talk a little bit about stress. Oh my, I felt like that last week with that pencil. So when we define stress, the definition I like to use is it is a whole body response to a real or an imagined threat. And it's programmed into our DNA by nature to keep us alive and to keep us safe. We're equipped with the sympathetic nervous system, which is fight, flight, or freeze, to help keep us alive. The problem is that most of the stressful situations that we have to deal with in the current world are actually our thoughts interpreting a situation. For example, just think about the last time you listened to the news, and maybe the time you heard that, well, there's a new variation of the COVID virus and it's far more contagious. Just what happened with your thoughts in that moment? Were you affected by that virus? Probably not. But were you anticipating what you or your loved ones might have to deal with in facing that variation of the virus that could possibly be happen? Or what happened in the Capitol last week? You know, how is this going to relate to the inauguration? I mean, just countless thoughts arising, but none of it was happening in that real time. What was happening was our interpretation of the thoughts. With meditation and mindfulness, we are training our brains, just like you train yourself to do anything else, to focus on what is really happening, what is focusing on the real, not what we imagine to be happening. And I love this slide here. This is the brain and the heart having a conversation. So the heart is saying to the brain, what's wrong, brain? And brain says, I'm frozen, I'm in a panic. And heart says, oh no. Heart says, are we in danger? Is somebody else in danger? And the brain says, no, I have a lot to do and I don't know how I'm going to get it all done. So heart says, that's weird. So there's no actual threat going on, but our perception of that threat causes the stress response to kick in. We know how to go from 0 to 60 very, very quickly. You know how that stress response, once the trigger appears, all the other signs in your body and your thoughts and your emotions kick in. Well, what I'm suggesting to you is it's really important to train ourselves to go from 60 back to 0, to find ways to activate that parasympathetic nervous system. And you don't learn to do it overnight. Practice, practice, practice. So this is how meditation can help. And I'm going to just review these 4 points and then talk a little bit about some of the interesting things that we've found out about meditation because of medical technology that we have, like functional MRI machines that can actually measure things. So we know that meditation trains and strengthens the focus muscle in your brain, and there's actual physical changes that happen that support this. It improves our physical well-being. A lot of people get into meditation either because they're not sleeping well or for some other physical reason to dial down their stress. So there's a lot of physical benefits. It can also reduce pain. By freeing our minds up from unnecessary distracting thoughts, we enhance our creativity and problem solving. And certainly if you talk to anybody who's engaged in a regular practice, they do tend to seem more at ease and more joyful. And isn't that something we all want? So looking at the brain with an MRI, these are some of the things that they've found. And I don't have this up on a slide. I'm just going to share these with you. I want to recommend a TED Talk. It's not on the resource list, but it's something you may want to make a note about and view when you have the opportunity. The TED Talks are great. They're 15 to 25 minutes long, dealing with many different aspects of anything from humor to science to you name it. But the talk is given by a woman named Sarah Lazar, Lazar. And the name of the talk is How Meditation Changes the Brain. So for those of you who are interested and would like to pursue this further, I really invite you to Google it and take the time to watch it. It's very interesting. So we know that meditation focuses the monkey mind, which is generally something that's associated with greater overall happiness. And according to research that's been done, meditation helps to manage depression, anxiety, including social anxiety and pain. Now, you know, there's an area in your brain, a very small area called the amygdala or the amygdala, depending on how you want to pronounce it. And that's the fear and arousal center. That's what gets triggered when you're under stress. Think about people who are suffering with PTSD. And measuring their amygdalas, we find that they are much larger than we would expect them to be because of this constant arousal. This little part of the brain is getting stimulated and stimulated and stimulated. So it actually gets bigger. When we have a regular practice of meditation, the amygdala tends to shrink, which would translate to you're less apt to be triggered into the stress response. The other thing is increases the volume of another area of the brain known as the hippocampus. And the hippocampus is very important. It's essential for memory and learning. And as we get older, the hippocampus tends to shrink. And in people who meditate, their hippocampus tends to lose less volume, which makes them perform better on tasks of memory, recall, and learning in general as they age. They've done research on instructing people in meditation who were about to take standardized tests. And after something like 8 short weeks, they performed much better on standardized tests than non-meditators. Meditation has been also used recently as an additional treatment for certain addictions. They find that people who are trained in meditation and mindfulness have a lower recidivism, a lower rate of falling back on the old behaviors associated with addiction. So there's lots of ways we can use meditation that are substantiated by science. Okay. And what I want to stress to you is meditation is not going to change your life, but it is going to make you happier, more comfortable, more productive in the life that you already have and in the relationships that you already have, all of those experiences. So before we begin, I have this little video to show. Let's briefly unmute if anybody has any questions or comments. There's a lot of science I was sharing with you right now. So perhaps if you have any question that you'd like to take, maybe we could have the mics open for a couple of minutes.
Judy,
Yes.
this is Patty, the other Patty.
Hi, Patty.
Is there any relationship or has there been any research done on meditation with people with Alzheimer's, early Alzheimer's? Anything? When you were talking about areas of the brain, I thought, gee, that would be a interesting thing.
Well, yeah, particularly since we know that in Alzheimer's, the hippocampus does shrink. So, and also just normally as we age, but I know there's so much research going on right now. I can look into that for you, Patty, to see if there are any specific studies that I can pass along to you about that, if you'd like to be aware of that.
I could research it too. I just was wondering if that were something that you had as one of the benefits.
Well, I mean, just it would stand to reason.
Yes, exactly.
That if you're a regular practitioner and you continue to practice as you get older, you have less hippocampus shrinkage, you have less general shrinkage of the brain, the amount of gray matter in a meditator who's age 50, and these are regular meditators who have been meditating for a while, the depth of their gray matter is equivalent to a 25-year-old.
Yeah,
So that's been established. And also we know that it helps focus. One of the things that happens in Alzheimer's is a loss of focus and a failure of memory.
Yeah, good. All right, thanks.
And I just noticed in the chat box that it was shared, the link, the TED Talk link. Giovanni shared the TED Talk link to that talk by Sarah Lazar. So if you want to check out the chat box and get the link, there it is. Anything else anybody wants to weigh in on the science? Okay. So walking meditation. As I mentioned, walking meditation, as I see it, is a great way to make that step, you'll excuse the pun, from a formal meditation seated practice to the practice of mindfulness and other things that we do day to day, day in and day out. So what I'm going to do is show you a video that I created because I was trying to figure out how to juggle the computer so that I could demonstrate it. And then we will all do it together. So we're going to watch the video, we'll talk, and then we will do the practice together. So just get comfortable and let's watch the video. Here we go. Good morning, everybody. So I decided to create a short video on walking meditation, just to kind of go over some of the basics, how we do it, why we do it. Normally, when we're walking with a purpose. We're walking to get from one spot to another, from point A to point B. Walking meditation is different. We're walking simply for the sake of walking. We're transforming a practice that we do every day into a meditation practice. So it's really not about getting anywhere. It's not about reaching a goal or reaching the end of a pathway or whatever. It's simply about being with the body and the breath through the practice of walking. We call it walking meditation and not mindful walking because there is a sort of a subtle difference between the two things. Walking meditation can be done inside in a very small space. The intention there is to draw your focus inward, just as we do with seated meditation, on the body, on the breath. Mindful walking is frequently done outdoors, and it's done with the intention of opening up all the five senses to what is around us, to be fully present to the sounds, the smells, the sights that we see while we're walking. We'll talk a little bit more about mindfulness in our third session. So this meditative walking is kind of a transition point between seated meditation and mindfulness. The interesting thing about walking meditation is when you go on a retreat, if it's a meditation retreat, frequently seated meditation is alternated with walking meditation. And there's a good reason for that, because it's difficult to sit and sit and sit for hours at a time or half hours at a time, whatever it is. So it's good to get up and move, but to not lose that concentration that you have during meditation. And also for some people, walking meditation is a much more accessible form of meditation because they find it very difficult for whatever reason to sit still and to focus. So walking meditation really helps those folks as well. So a couple of guidelines. If you are using a cane, a walker, some kind of assistive device, you can certainly do that and practice walking meditation. If for some reason you do not want to do the practice with us today, that's fine. You can simply stay seated and do your breath awareness meditation that we learned in the first session. So first and foremost, I want to show you what we do with our hands. So there's a couple of choices that you have. Typically, you see people doing walking meditation with their hands in this chalice mudra. So the shoulders are relaxed, one palm is supporting the back of the other hand. And that works really, really well. If that doesn't work for you, you can also take hold of the opposite wrists behind your back. But whatever position is comfortable for you, that keeps your shoulders relaxed, that allows you to breathe easily, would certainly be fine. So this would be fine. This would be fine. You know, if you have pockets, maybe you want to put your hands in your pockets, but whatever works is the best thing to do. So to begin, I'm going to show you different variations. You can walk back and forth in a small space, or you can actually do a circle. It's up to you. So I'm going to do the back and forth one just to begin. I'm going to let my eyes rest at a spot several feet in front of me, shoulders relaxed. And I'm going to begin to walk. I'm going to lift one foot, breathe in and exhale and place the heel down. So try to let the heel strike the floor first. Roll your body through. And as you do, you'll notice that the heel of the back foot lifts automatically. So then you bring that foot forward, placing the heel, rolling forward. These are small steps. When you reach the end of your path, just bring the feet together and turn around and go back in the other direction. So you'll notice that I'm moving quite slowly. And sometimes you find that by changing the pace of your walking, you might feel a little wobbly, a little unstable, and that's perfectly normal. So if you need to walk a little faster to feel more secure, that's certainly an option. I'm just going to go back in this direction. Breathing in, lifting the foot, exhaling, placing the heel down. trying to coordinate the movements of your feet with the movement of your breath, using just enough energy to engage the muscles that you need and relaxing the rest. Feeling the whole sole of your foot striking the floor. So, as I mentioned, if you choose, you can also walk in a small circle. And that's kind of nice because then you can just continue walking without having to pause to turn. Letting your breath awareness get a little bit more pronounced the longer you walk. And then when you're done, you pause. Just notice how you feel. Notice any awarenesses that come up. Namaste. We'll try that together now. So I hope that video explained clearly the practice that we're going to do now. So make sure you have a space, and as you saw from the space I was using, it's a very small space that you need for this. I'm going to ring a bell when we begin walking. I will ring another bell when we are complete, and I will invite you at that point, when you hear the second bell, to just return to your seat, to remain in silence, and to go back to the first technique of breath awareness. So go to the space. Oh, before we begin, are there any remaining questions that I can answer before we start the practice? Just want to make sure that everybody's clear. Okay. So coming to a standing position, let yourself take a minute to just feel yourself standing. Eyes are open. Find a comfortable place to rest your gaze towards the floor, slightly in front of you, and a position that allows your shoulders and arms to be relaxed, and your breath to be full. Wonderful. And let it be your intention just to be fully present to the sensation of walking and to the breath. And let's begin. As you take a step, allow your heel to strike the floor first, if you can, and simply roll your weight forward so the back heel lifts. And then moving that other foot forward and repeating. Over time, let your breath coordinate with your walking, so that perhaps you breathe in as the foot lifts and exhale into the earth as your foot strikes. Take your time. Feel your whole body walking. Notice the sensation in your feet, your legs, your upper body. And maybe repeating a phrase as you breathe. Breathing in peace. Breathing out, letting go of tension. Releasing it down into the earth. If your thoughts should grow busy, just notice. Come back to your step and your breath. Thich Nhat Hanh says, breathing in, I calm my body and my mind. Breathing out, I relax. Dwelling in the present moment, I know this is a perfect moment. So gradually bringing your walking practice to an end and returning to your seat. You can take a moment or two to observe how you're feeling. And returning again to the breath. Gradually letting your breath get a little bit deeper now. And if you need to, just doing a little stretch, wiggling your fingers and toes, maybe reaching out with your arms. Whatever. So now is an opportunity to unmute. For those of you who would like to share, love to hear from you, particularly if this was your first experience with walking meditation. So feel free to speak.
I found that having a visual focal point helped me to stay more focused and keep other thoughts out. I also felt like I was concentrating more on what I was doing. I find this seated meditation, I'm able to concentrate on the diaphragmatic breathing. Are we supposed to be trying to do that while walking also?
I think as much as you can focus on your breath, because there's a lot that you're focusing on when you're doing walking meditation. You're focusing on the placement of your feet, the rolling of the foot, the position of your body. The more you practice the diaphragmatic breathing, the more it will become the most natural way for you to breathe. So you will not have to necessarily think about it that much. But when we walk, we're just giving the mind another thing to focus on. And I like to, for my own practice, I like to try to coordinate the speed of my walking with the speed of my breath. So there's that sense of coordination when the foot lifts to move forward, I'm breathing in. And then as the foot comes down, I'm breathing out. It feels most natural to me. Interesting, I've seen movies, videos of monks doing this mindful walking, and they don't always walk very slowly. Sometimes they walk very quickly. Did anybody have trouble with the speed of the walking, that it was much slower than you normally walk? Do you feel
Yeah.
a little unsteady?
Yeah, I felt
Challenging.
I had to adjust and walk more quickly to stay steady.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And then that got me out of sync with the breathing. So I just kind of made the best of it.
Well, like I said, you don't learn to ride a bike overnight. You don't learn to do these practices in one sitting. But I find that I think what happens with our brains is that we have a speed at which we normally walk. I'm a nurse. Nurses always walk really fast. I don't know why they do, but they do. And so when I first did this practice and tried to slow my breathing down, I was wobbling like a tree in a windstorm. I was all over the place. So your mind is conditioned. So when you do certain activities, that you do them in a certain way. And so we're all of an age, we've all been walking a long, long time. So our bodies are conditioned to walk at a certain speed in a certain way. So I want to tell you that you're not doing anything wrong. It's normal to feel a little unbalanced when you first start slowing down your walking. Does that make sense, Steve? It is Steve I'm talking to, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Yes,
Okay.
that does make sense. That is, thank you.
Anybody
Akin
else
to-
have any? Yeah.
Is this akin to labyrinth walking?
Ooh, I love labyrinth walking. I wish we could get one in the Nork where we could do it together. Have you done the labyrinth, Holly?
No.
Okay. Well, labyrinth walking can be a type of mindful walking or meditative walking, depending on the intention with which you do it. The labyrinth, for those of you who don't know what this is, but they usually do it on a big sheet of canvas, and it's meant to duplicate the labyrinth on the floor of the cathedral in Chartres, France. And they originally put the labyrinth in the floor of the cathedral because pilgrimages were a very important part of religious practice. But not everybody had the time or the money to actually go on a pilgrimage physically. So they would do a symbolic pilgrimage by walking the labyrinth. A labyrinth is not a maze. You can't get lost in a labyrinth. There's one way in and there's one way out. And it's meant to symbolize your life journey or your pilgrimage. But yes, you can certainly make, if you have the opportunity to walk a labyrinth. I think there's one at the VA hospital, if I'm not mistaken. If you have the opportunity, I think there's one also in the lobby of Christ the King Church out in Guilderland. So you can walk it that way. It's interesting that when you walk it with a group of people, because you have to speed up or slow down or whatever to accommodate the presence of other people, which to me makes it really symbolic of the life journey also, because we're not doing our journey alone. We're doing it in the company of other people. So it's an interesting experience. So that was a very long answer to a short question, Holly. I'm sorry.
Judy, it's Melanie. I think that there's also a labyrinth on Madison Avenue by St. Andrew's Church. It's either St. Andrew's Church or the other church that's like a block away from it. I can't. It is St.
Okay.
Andrew's. Okay.
Yeah, and I think probably if you Google it, I know there's a lovely one at Kripalu in Lenox. So if you Google it, you can probably see lots of places where there's an opportunity to do the practice. And it's really a lovely practice. And it's different every time you do it because your life is different every time you do it from day to day. Anything else? So as with the breath awareness meditation, I would encourage you to practice this technique during the week. You know, your homework is always to practice. And if you find, oh, Giovanni put up a link, the old St. Andrew's Church.org for the labyrinth. If you're comfortable with your 5 minutes and feel you want to start to expand the time, please feel free to do so. We want to go to this practice out of attraction, not, oh, I got to sit for 5 minutes or 10 minutes. I want it to be a welcome part of your day. So, you know, try to keep the practice manageable. I would rather have you stop wanting to do more than saying, oh my gosh, is that finally done? Make sense? All right. For next week, and Marla will send this out in a reminder when she sends you the link for this session and the reminder for next week's session, we're going to be practice conscious eating. So what I would like you each to have is a small piece of probably fruit. What works really, really well for this practice is a raisin. And you don't need to have a whole box of raisins, just a half dozen, 2 or 3, whatever is fine. Just have that available. If you really can't stand raisins, you can just take a small piece of apple or other fruit. Okay, just really small. You're not going to grab a whole apple and bring it to the session, just a small piece. So I salute you all. I wish you the very, very best with your practice. We certainly need these practices more than ever during these difficult times. Have a wonderful week. Feel free to reach out to me. Namaste.